Page 118. Some of you had some issues with this, so I'm going to go through on how to do it. So we're starting here, and these are coefficients. So we multiply those together. So it's the 2 times 3. Then we have x's. So we have x to the 5th plus 2 because the bases are being multiplied together. And then remember, this is a 1 here, and this is a 1, so 1 plus 1. So I have 6, x to the 7th, y to the 2nd. Then, on this one, remember, the exponents come before doing multiplication. So before I can multiply the 4 and the 2 together, that means that I have to raise the 4 to the 2nd power. Remember, there's an invisible 1 right there. So 4 to the 1 times 2, x to the 4 times 2. And there's an invisible 1 there. So y to the 1 times 2. And then we're multiplying this over here. When I do that, I get 4 squared. I get x to the 8th, y to the 2nd, times 2, x to the 3rd, y to the 4th. I come over here a little bit. So 4 squared is 16, and I'm going to be multiplying that by 2. I have x to the 8th, but it's also being multiplied by x to the 3rd, so I add the 3 because the bases are being multiplied together. Then we have the y squared, and it's being multiplied by y to the 4th, so I add the plus 4. This would get me 32 because 16 times 2 is 32. Then we get x to the 11th and y to the 6th. Next one. Now if I look at the coefficients here, 36 over 4, that's just division. 36 divided by 4. That would get me 9. So I don't even have to do anything else with that, with the coefficients. But if you look at this, there's nothing else we can do in the numerator. So now that there's nothing else I can do in the numerator, then I have x's divided by x's, y's divided by y's. Now you could do the expanded version of this and write out 9x's on top and 7x's on bottom and subtract those, or sorry, cross them out. But I want to do the rule. So I'm going to actually write down the x and I'm going to subtract my exponents because that's a quotient, that's division. And I'm going to do 4 minus 3 for the exponents of the y's. So that would give me 9 x to the 2nd, y to the 1st, or just y. Here. Now if I look at the numerator, boys and girls, I have an exponent going on here. That's parentheses raised to an exponent. I have got to do exponents before I do division. If you remember PEMDAS, that's what it tells you. So I'm going to take 2 to the 1 times 3, x to the 1 times 3, y to the 5 times 3. And that's over 2, x to the 3rd, y to the 8th. I'm actually going to come up here and write this. So I have now 2 to the 3rd, x to the 3rd, y to the 15th, over 2, and that's to the 1st power, x to the 3rd, y to the 8th. So I subtract my exponents, 2 to the 3 minus 1, x to the 3 minus 3, y to the 15 minus 8. That would get me 2 squared, x to the 0, y to the 7th. Now remember, x to the 0 power, that just becomes 1. So 2 squared is 4, y to the 7th. Trying to make it smaller. It's having issues. Now some of you decided that this next problem was multiplication with a negative 12. Guys, this is a subtraction sign. It is not multiplication, it is subtraction. Now again, you can't do subtraction until you deal with this exponent right here. So I have negative 5 to the 1 times 2. I have x to the 6 times 2, y to the 2 times 2, and then I just write this other part down. as is. There's nothing to do with it yet. This would get negative 5 to the second power, x to the 12th power, y to the 4th power, minus 12x to the 12th power, y to the 4th power. Now, this becomes 25 because negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. Now, this is subtraction, boys and girls. Now, I'm going to write off to the side real quick something. Back long time ago, we learned that if I have, I'm going to put, oh, that was horrible. If I had 4x and I subtracted, I don't know, 2x, the x's don't change. We just change the coefficients. Same thing's going to happen here. These variables and their exponents are the exact same thing. So all we're going to be doing is subtracting the coefficients. We learned this a long time ago, guys. So the x to the 12th and the y to the 4th doesn't change. We just subtract the coefficients, and that would get me 13. This next one, again, there's nothing to do in the numerator. It's simplified in the numerator, it's simplified in the denominator. So now I just need to do my division. So 6 divided by 3 would get me 2 over 1. So I have 2x to the 10 minus 8, y to the 4 minus 7. 2 to the x squared, 2x squared, y to the negative 3. Negative exponent means please move me. So I'm not going to have it in the numerator like it is right now because I want a positive exponent. So it's going to move to the denominator. It's going to move to the denominator. Okay, here we go. Now, remember, boys and girls, if I have x to the 3rd times x to the 5th, I add the exponents, x to the 3 plus 5. So we're going to do the same thing over here. I know that they're negatives, but that's okay. So I'm going to multiply the 6 and the 4 together. I have x to the negative 1 plus a negative 4, y to the 5 plus a negative 2. I know we don't actually write plus minus, but for right now that we're just going to write it like that. So this is going to get me negative 5, and this is going to get me 3. This has a negative exponent, so that needs to move to the denominator. So I now have 24 y to the 3rd, but the x to the 5th moves to the denominator. Okay, next one. Again, before we can do multiplication, we have to deal with this exponent. There is a little 1 right there. So I have 3 to the 1 times 3, x to the negative 6 times 3, y to the 2 times 3, times 2, x to the 10th, y to the negative 7th. So I have 3 to the 3rd, x to the negative 18, y to the 6th, times 2, x to the 10th, y to the negative 7th. 3 to the 3rd, we're going to bring it up here. 3 to the 3rd is 27 times 2. Then I have my x's. So I have negative 18 plus 10, and the y has a 6, and I'm running out of room. 6 plus negative 7. That would get me 54. I don't know why I'm not, oh, I know why I'm not writing it. To the negative 8, y to the negative 1. So actually, both of these are going to move to the denominator. The 54 stays up top, x to the 8th, y. Okay, we're going to do this one here. Again, we have to deal with the numerator by itself first, then deal with the denominator. So I'm going to deal with the numerator. When I do that, I have negative 2 to the 1 times 2, x to the 1 times 2, y to the 1 times 2, times 10, x to the 3rd, y to the 11th, over 8 x to the 10th, y to the 4th. I'm going to move it over here. Move it up there. So I'm going to get negative 2 to the second power, x squared, y squared, times 10, x to the 3rd, y to the 11th, over 8, x to the 10th, y to the 4th. Okay, I can move it now. So this is going to get me 4. And then, oh, you know what? Before I do that, I'm actually going to move the 10 over. I have x's. I have an x squared times an x to the 3rd. So we're going to add our exponents. I have a y squared times a y to the 11th. So we add our exponents. Now, remember, you can always expand if you want. If expanding makes it easier for you, then do the expanding. So when I get this, I get 40, x to the 5th, y to the 13th, over 8, x to the 10th, y to the 4th. 8 goes into 40 5 times. And again, I subtract my exponent. So I have 5. I have x to the 5 minus 10, y to the 13 minus 4. I get 5x to the negative 5, y to the 9th. This part right here, it's negative, so it goes to the denominator. So I have 5y to the 9th over x to the 5th. Last but not least on this side, I deal with my numerator first. Remember that it has an invisible 1 right there. So I have 8 times 12. Then I have x to the 3rd plus 1. And then y to the 7th. And that is all over 3x squared y to the 4th minus 15x squared y to the 3rd. Okay. I'm going to get, what is that, 96 x to the 4th, y to the 7th, over, oops, I forgot the 3, x squared, y to the 4th, minus 15x squared, y to the 3rd. I'm going to bring it up here. Okay, 3 goes into 36, 32 times. So now I have 32x and that's going to be 4 minus 2. The y is going to be 7 minus 4. And then I have minus 15 x squared y to the 3rd. So I have 32 x squared y to the 3rd minus 15 x squared y to the 3rd. Look, the x's in their, the x and y with their exponents are exactly the same. So that means that I just subtract 32 minus 17, or minus 15 gets 17. And that is my answer for that one. Okay, over here. On this one, okay, there's an invisible 1, so I do 1 times 5. I have an x, and I add my exponents, because the bases are being multiplied together. I add my exponents. Remember, this has an invisible 1 here. So I'm left with 5x to the negative 5, y to the 19th. How about 19 is not it? How about 9? I saw 11 instead of 1. So this right here gets moved to the denominator. So I have 5y to the 9th, x to the 5th. And so if I was to look over here, that is the same as number 9. So number 9 would be red. So all the 9s you would color red. So then I look at this next one. Again, remember, this has an invisible 1 here. So I take 6, and that's 1 times 2. X is 2 times 2. Y to the 3 times 2. Over 4x squared y to the 5th. 36 x to the 4th y to the 6th over 4 x squared y to the 5th. 4 goes into 36 9 times. So then I have 9 x to the 4 minus 2 y to the 6 minus 5. So I get 9x squared y. And that would be the same as number 3. So orange is 3. All the 3's are orange. So over here, I do exponents before I do anything. So 3 to the 1 times 3, x to the negative 3 times 3, y. Remember there's an invisible 1. 1 times 3 times 2x y to the negative 4. So 3 to the 3rd, x to the negative 9, y to the 3rd times 2x y to the negative 4. 3 to the 3rd is 27. We multiply that by 2. We have an invisible 1 there. So x to the negative 9 plus 1, y to the 3rd plus a negative 4. That would get me 54 x to the negative 8, y to the negative 1. So the 54 stays where it is in the numerator. X to the 8th moves to the denominator. Y to the negative 1 moves to the denominator. Okay, again with this one, we have to do the exponent first. There's an invisible little 1 right there. So 3 to the 1 times 3, x to the 5 times 3, y to the 5 times 3, over 3 x to the 3rd, y to the 11th, plus 4 x to the 12th, y to the 4th. So I get 3 to the 3rd here, x to the 15th, y to the 15th. That is right, okay. Over 3x to the 3rd, y to the 11th. Okay, so I'm going to write it over here. Remember, this has an invisible 1 right here. So I get 3 to the 3 minus 1, x to the 15 minus 3, y to the 15 minus 11, and then plus 4x to the 12th, y to the 4th. So this would get me 3 squared, x to the 12th, y to the 4th, plus 4x to the 12th, y to the 4th. Now, if you look at it, we have x to the 12th and y to the 4th on both of these. So all we do is add the coefficients. So that would get me 13x to the 12th, y to the 4th. And I know that we did one like that. Next one. 2 goes into 34 17 times. So I have 17, and then 10 minus 8, y 9 minus 6. So I get 17x squared y to the 3rd. And this next one, 7 goes into 42 6 times. 9 minus 2, 5 minus 3. I get 6 x to the 7th, y to the 2nd. Three times 8. That's multiplication there. Negative 4 plus a negative 1. 9 plus a negative 6. So I would get 24x to the negative 5, y to the 3rd. So this goes to the denominator. So I get 24 y to the 3rd over x to the 5th. Try it one more time. So 2 to the 1 times 4, x to the negative 2 times 4, y to the 3 times 4, times 2, x to the 19th, y to the negative 6. So that would get me 2 to the 4th, x to the negative 8, y to the 12th, times 2x to the 19th, y to the negative 6th. This is to the first power. So 2 to the 4 plus 1, x to the negative 8 plus 19, and y to the 12 minus 6. So I have 2 to the 5th power, x to the 11th power, y to the 6th power. 2 to the 5th power is 32, and voila. Okay, again, we have to do our exponent first. So negative 8 to the 1 times 2, x to the 3 times 2, y to the 2 times 2, times, oh, I didn't leave myself room. Oops. That's okay. You'll forgive me. 32, x to the 8th, y to the 3rd. So, negative 8 squared, x to the 6th, y to the 4th, times 2x squared, y to the 6th, over 32, x to the 8th, y to the 3rd. So that means I'm going to get 64 times 2, because negative 8 squared is 64. Then I have x to the 6 plus 2, y to the 4 plus 6. That's all over 32, x to the 8th, y to the 3rd. By the way, 32 goes into 64 twice. So I'm left with 4, x to the 8th, y to the 10th, over x to the 8th, y to the 3rd. So 4, x to the 8 minus 8, y to the 10 minus 3. So I get 4, y to the 7th, because this would get me x to the 0 power, which is 1. And last, but certainly not least, I deal with a numerator. So I have 3 times 6. I have 3 plus 1, because remember that's an invisible 1. Y to the 4 plus negative 5 over 3 to the 1 times 2, x to the 1 times 2, y to the 1 times 2. So on the numerator I get 18, x to the 4th, y to the negative 1, over 3 squared, x squared, y squared. So this becomes 18, x to the 4th, y to the negative 1 over 9, x squared, y squared. So 9 goes into that twice. So I have 2, x to the 4 minus 2, y to the negative 1 minus 2. So I get 2x to the, oh, I almost wrote the wrong number there, 2, y to the negative 3. So this goes to the denominator. So I get 2x squared over y to the 3rd. Yep, and so 6 would be brown. Okay, I hope that helped as to how to do those